Good day, folks. It's Sean here from Air Photography. As we head into the summer, there's going to be a lot of brand new pilots who are going to be flying for the very first time. Perhaps you've just purchased the brand new Mini 3 and that's going to be the very first drone you've ever piloted. As you learn to fly, you might find yourself wanting to improve your skills when it comes to capturing cinematic content. So I thought I'd put this little video together consisting of various drone moves that you can easily learn and can produce some stunning results. Now, some of these are easier than others to pick up, but with a little bit of practice, you'll be capturing like a pro in no time at all. Now, you can follow along no matter what drone you're flying, as the principles are the same pretty well for every drone. And it doesn't matter what controller you're using to fly with, whether you're using something like the RCN1 or perhaps an older style DJI remote, or even the RC Pro. The fundamentals are all the same, the stick movements are all the same. So with all that said, let's just jump right in and get started. Now, in my opinion, one of the most important drone moves you can learn is a simple rotation. They can be a little bit tricky to master at first to make it look smooth and cinematic, but once you've mastered a simple rotation, you can use the skills that you've learned with it to implement into other more complex drone movements. Now, like many of the drone movements that we're going to be discussing, a lot of these can be done with intelligent flight modes, such as point of interest or even quick shots, but it is a really good idea to learn how to do all these manually. First of all, it gives you full control, you can get creative, and at the end of the day, it's just always fun to pilot the drone yourself. Now, when it comes to doing a rotation, there's two different ways in which we can tackle it. To do a rotation, you're going to use both sticks, and what we're going to do is either push in or we're going to pull out. My preferred method is pulling out, and what I like to do when I'm going to start a rotation is I start with the right control stick and I pull it out. The farther you pull it to the side, the faster the drone is going to move. When we pull it to the side, that means the drone is going to be flying sideways. Once the drone is moving sideways, you want to take the other control stick and pull it in the opposite direction. Once you do that, the drone is going to start to yaw, and that's going to cause it to start to rotate around the subject that you're filming. And depending on how far you have the sticks pulled over, that's going to dictate the speed at which the drone moves around the subject. And this is just going to take some practice. Your first couple attempts are going to look really rough, and your subject is most likely no longer going to be in the center. But just keep at it. You'll find you can actually pick it up pretty quickly. And once you've mastered it, it becomes just like riding a bicycle. You don't even really have to think too much about how far to pull the sticks over. Now, with a simple rotation, there are so many variations to it. You can capture a lot of different looks just by how fast you're moving, the height at which you're rotating around, the angle of the camera, and the distance of the subject. So you can play around with all those variations and come up with some really interesting shots. Now, the next movement is just a straight down camera shot. Now, it's very basic, but it can produce some pretty stunning imagery. And on top of that, there's many variations to it as well. For example, you could have the drone just staying stationary if you have some movement down below you, but you may want to implement some movement on the drone as well. So the first thing you're going to do is tilt your camera straight down by using the gimbal wheel, or depending on the controller you're using, you may have a button on the bottom of it that will automatically put the camera straight down, or you can program your function button to point the camera straight down as well. Once you've hit record on the drone, you can then use your right control stick to control the movement. You can push the stick forward to go straight, you can pull it down to go in reverse, or you can push it from side to side, depending on what type of movement you want to make. And again, depending how far you push it forward will dictate the speed. Sometimes you want a nice slow cinematic shot. Other times you may want something fast and sweeping. Again, just test out different speeds and movements until you find a look that suits what you're filming. Now, the third cinematic move that I think every beginner drone pilot should master is just an overhead spin. It's a fairly easy movement to learn. Basically, it's the same as a straight down shot. You're going to turn your gimbal straight down, but instead of using the right control stick, we're going to use the left control stick to yaw the drone. We can either push it to the right or to the left, and the drone is going to spin accordingly. So if you want to go clockwise, you're going to push it to the right. If you want to go counterclockwise, you're going to push it to the left. And just like all the other drone movements, depending how far you push it side to side, is how fast the drone is going to rotate. Again, you may want something nice and slow, or you may want it a little bit faster. Once you've mastered that, the other thing you can implement is raising or lowering the altitude. That can make for a nice dramatic effect as well. Now, doing that does get a little bit more complicated, because not only are we going to be pushing the control stick to the side, we're also going to be either pushing it up or down, depending whether you want to raise the altitude or lower the altitude. So say you want to raise your altitude while you're spinning. What I like to do is start pushing up on the altitude to get the speed at which the drone is rising. And usually you don't want to do it too fast. You just want to kind of nudge it up a little bit. And as you're pushing up, you're also going to push to the side depending on which direction you want to rotate. So basically that control stick's going in on an angle like that. And again, the more you move the stick, the faster the drone will rotate and the faster it will raise in altitude. And to do that same movement but lowering the altitude, you would do the exact same thing, except pushing up, you're going to pull down, and then again off to the side depending on which way you want to rotate. For the most part, you don't want to touch the right control stick at all because that will move the drone away from the subject you're trying to film. Now, the next movement we're going to go over is called the reveal, and it's a very common move that a lot of drone pilots like to use. Basically, when you have something off in the distance that you want to reveal cinematically, start with the camera pointing down, again using your scroll wheel. Now, what you're going to do is push your right stick forward. That's going to get the drone moving forward. And of course the camera is pointed straight down, so at this point we're only filming the ground. Now as we're moving forward, we're going to slowly spin the gimbal dial. That's going to slowly raise up the camera. Depending on how far you twist the gimbal dial is how fast the camera is going to move up. So it will take a little bit of practice to get the timing right. And again, the farther you push the right control stick is going to dictate how fast the drone is flying. Now, if you find you have a hard time controlling the gimbal speed, you can go into the settings on most drones and adjust the speed at which the gimbal moves. Now, the next cinematic move is something I call a flyover focus. And basically with it, what you're going to be doing is flying over a subject. And as you fly over it, you're going to be adjusting the gimbal wheel to keep the camera pointed at it. Now, it's very similar to doing a reveal. We're going to be using our right control stick to either move the drone forward or in reverse, because you can actually do this movement in both directions. So what you're going to do is line up your subject. Make sure it's in the center of the frame or close to it. And again, depending on how far you push the stick forward, that's going to dictate the speed at which the drone is flying. So you may want to keep it slow to start until you've mastered the movements. Now, while you're flying forward, again, you're going to control the gimbal wheel, and you just want to slowly adjust the gimbal to keep the subject center in frame. Again, with a move like this, it takes precise timing, and it's not something you're probably going to get right on the first time. Just keep practicing, do it over and over, and eventually you'll get the timing exactly right with that gimbal wheel, and the results can look really good. Now, another variation of this move, instead of flying forward, we can use that technique where we just raise the altitude, but again, we're going to keep the subject in focus by adjusting the gimbal wheel. So what we're going to do is move the left control stick forward. That's going to get the drone to raise an altitude. And as we're raising an altitude, we're going to turn the scroll wheel, and that's going to keep the subject in focus. And again, we can do that with lowering the altitude. We can pull the left stick downwards and again adjust our gimbal wheel. And again, it keeps the subject in focus. So another nice variation of that same simplistic move. Now the next movement is probably one of my most used when I'm out filming content. And basically I just call it a sideways with a slight rotation. And it can actually look really good. You know, flying straight forward or just sideways or backwards, you know, you can get nice results doing that, but sometimes adding just a slight rotation while you're doing that can make what you're capturing just a little bit more visually appealing. Now this shot is good when you're just trying to capture a broad landscape. It doesn't work as well when you're trying to capture just a subject. I like to use it when I just want to capture the scenery in whole around me. Basically what you're going to do is start with the right control stick and you're just going to press it to the side. That's going to get the drone moving sideways. Once you're moving sideways, we're going to basically use the same technique as when you're doing a full rotation, except we're not going to move it quite as much. You might have the right control stick all the way over, and then you're going to take the left control stick and move it in the opposite direction, but just slightly, not as far as you have the right control stick. And what that's going to do is get the drone moving sideways, but it's going to add a slight rotation. And usually the results look really good. There's a lot of different variations you can do with that move. Of course, direction and how fast you're moving. Now, the next type of shot I like to do is something called a proximity shot. Now, this is something you have to be very careful with, and it's something that you may not want to try right away until you're comfortable with your drone and how it moves. A proximity shot is basically when you're flying close to something, either over top of it or beside it. Now, when doing proximity shots, you may want to have your obstacle avoidance turned on if you have a drone that is capable of that. Other times you may want to turn it off because that obstacle avoidance may get in your way. Now, there's no specific commands on the remote for it. Basically, you just want to line up your shot, figure out what you're going to be flying in proximity to. Then you're going to use your right control stick to either fly forward or in reverse, or you may be flying sideways with something in front of you. Again, you have to be very careful. And for some people, this is a style of shot that they may not want to risk trying to grab. Now, the next drone move is probably one of the simplest ones you can do, but again, it can be very powerful. And that's just raising the drone up. And you can use this as a form of a reveal as well. For example, here you can see I'm just rising up above a tree line. I'm up on a hill, and once we get up above the tree line, you can see the city down below is revealed. But you can use that move for many other scenarios as well. Perhaps you're flying in a city and you're just kind of rising up along some buildings. It's a very simple move, but again, it can look really good. And of course, depending on how far you move the left stick forward to raise your altitude, the speed at which the drone rises will be adjusted accordingly. And not only that, you can use that same technique to do a lowering shot, which can look just as dramatic. The only difference is there, you're going to pull the left stick down instead of pushing forward. And the last shot is probably one of the most basic shots you can do, and that is just flying forward. Now, for the most part, you don't want to film all your content flying forward or in reverse because, it gets a little bit boring, but it can still be actually quite powerful. And mixed in with all the other shots, it can be very dramatic and look really good. Flying over a tree canopy can look really nice, or above a city. Once you've captured that, you mix it in with all your other drone movements, and it usually blends in really nicely. Now, of course, when you're doing just a straight ahead shot, you can spice it up a little bit by doing some jump cuts or even some speed ramping. Now, jump cuts and speed ramping, we will take a look at later on in a video that I'm working on. That should be out in a week or so. So yeah, folks, those are some movements that you can easily learn with your drone that can really make your videos look a little more cinematic. Of course, the next step is editing all those shots together to make them look good. Now, if you are new to piloting drones, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Over the coming weeks and coming months, I have a series of videos planned to help brand new pilots get the most out of their content, including organizing your content, some basic editing, some more advanced editing tutorials, color grading, how to make the footage look a little bit better than what the drone can capture, and of course simple techniques like adding music and different transitions to your videos. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. Give it a thumbs up if you did, it's always greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we'll see you in the next one.